In a slow, steady voice, calm but resonant, there is no problem more fascinating than that of the extinct man known as the Neanderthal. Those were the words of Dr. Arthur Keith, written back in 1915, when the story of our ancient relatives was still little more than fragments of bone and imagination. For more than a century, we have pictured Neanderthals as creatures of ice, heavy-browed hunters trudging across frozen plains, wrapped in furs, chasing mammoths beneath grey European skies. That image became the truth we accepted, cold, primitive, and forever bound to the Ice Age. But new light has begun to pierce that frozen picture. In recent years, excavations at Xuchang and Longtan in China have uncovered something extraordinary: stone tools crafted in the same distinctive Quina style, long associated with Neanderthals thousands of miles away in Europe. The discovery is rewriting the very map of human prehistory. It suggests that East Asia was never an empty frontier. It was a crossroads, a meeting ground where Neanderthals, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens once crossed paths. They traded tools, shared genes, and adapted together to the rhythms of a living, changing land. Imagine walking through the misty forests of Yunnan 60,000 years ago, the air thick with humidity, the sound of gibbons echoing from the canopy, the flicker of firelight beneath dripping leaves. And they're not a myth, not a mistake, but a small band of Neanderthals tending their fire, their faces glowing softly in the light. A people we thought we knew, now seen in a place we never imagined. Beneath the misty hills of southwest China, near the edges of Yunnan's lush valleys, lies a place called Longtan, a quiet site that once echoed with the rhythm of stone against stone. What archaeologists uncovered there would shake one of the deepest assumptions about who the Neanderthals were and how far they had truly gone. For decades, the tools known as Quina scrapers were thought to belong only to Europe. Heavy, thick flakes of stone, carefully shaped, resharpened, and reused again and again by Neanderthal hands as they followed herds across the Ice Age. Plains. The Quina technique wasn't just a way of cutting hides. It was a philosophy, a reflection of a mind that planned ahead, that valued precision, efficiency, and endurance. Yet here in Longtan, buried in the red soil of southern China, archaeologists found hundreds of these same tools. Their edges were blunt from long use, their surfaces worn smooth from the grip of hands long gone. Carbon dating and sediment analysis revealed their astonishing age between 5,000 and 6,000 years old. That places them squarely within the Neanderthal timeline, far beyond what scientists once believed was their eastern boundary. Each artifact tells a quiet story. Thick scrapers designed to be sharpened again and again. Stone cores prepared with care, meant to yield predictable flakes. Together, they reveal a people who understood scarcity, who planned for the long journey, who carried knowledge rather than excess weight. This was technology for travelers, for survivors. Now imagine the scene. A humid evening 60,000 years ago. Rain patters through the canopy. Smoke drifts upward from a small fire under the trees. A Neanderthal sits crouched beside the flames, a flake of stone in his rough hands. He tilts it toward the light, studies its edge, and strikes just once to renew its sharpness. If these truly were Neanderthal tools, then their makers had travelled farther than anyone ever imagined. They were no longer the people of ice and stone alone. They were explorers, moving eastward through green forests, leaving behind silent traces of their journey in the earth of Longtan. When we look at the Quina tools from Longtan, we aren't just looking at stones. We're looking at thoughts, at decisions made tens of thousands of years ago by minds that understood time scarcity and adaptation. These tools weren't random flakes. They were the product of a culture that valued renewal, the ability to reuse, to reshape, to survive. In Europe, Neanderthals crafted Quina scrapers to butcher reindeer, bison, and wild horses in cold open woodlands. Every groove and edge was made for heavy hides and frozen meat. But in southern China, the story changes. The same technology reborn in a different world. Here, the forest was dense, humid, and alive, with smaller prey, wild pigs, monkeys, deer, moving through dripping vegetation. The Quina tools of Longtan, show how their makers adjusted, modifying the same strategy for a softer, wetter land. The soil itself remembers that world. Pollen grains trapped in the sediments tell us Longtan was once a mixed forest, cool, damp, teeming with life. Rivers cut through groves of oak and pine, fig trees tangled with bamboo. It was not a frozen steppe but a living, breathing mosaic of habitats. For archaeologists, that means something profound. The appearance of Quina technology so far east proves that invention is not confined to one place, that human creativity has no single homeland. Maybe Neanderthals brought it with them, or maybe another group facing the same challenges discovered it on their own. Either way, these stones are more than artifacts. They are messages, voices in the red earth, whispering that ancient humans were connected, ingenious, and far more alike than we once believed. Far to the north, in the icy shadows of the Altai Mountains, there is a cave called Denisova, a place that once echoed with the crackle of fire and the sound of stone against bone. Inside that cave, buried beneath thousands of years of sediment, scientists found traces of two worlds that were never meant to meet: the DNA of Neanderthals and the DNA of another long-lost lineage known as the Denisovans. Among the fragments, one discovery stood apart: a small piece of bone from a young girl. Her genome told a story no one expected. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father was Denisovan. They called her Deni, and through her the invisible line between two ancient peoples disappeared. Imagine that moment 100,000 years ago. A cave lit by flickering firelight. Outside, snow drifts across the mountain pass. Inside, two families sit close together, sharing warmth, food, and perhaps the first mixed language of humankind. The air smells of smoke and stone. And there, in the soft glow of the flames, the face of a child. Neither Neanderthal nor Denisovan alone, but both. Deni's existence changed everything. It proved that these two species didn't just meet. They mingled, shared, and learned from each other. Their genes crossed their tools, overlapped, and their worlds intertwined. The boundaries of species, once drawn in textbooks, began to blur. From that moment, the genetic and cultural axis of humanity stretched eastward through the steppes of Central Asia toward the green valleys of China. And it's there, deep in the heart of that vast land, where the next chapter of this story would be uncovered. Deep in the plains of central China, archaeologists unearthed two skulls that would challenge every boundary drawn between east and west. They were found near the city of Xuchang, and they were ancient, between 105 to 125,000 years old. Their brain cases were enormous, around 1,800 cubic centimeters, as large as, or even larger than our own. The back of each skull curved outward, forming the familiar bun-shaped profile known from Neanderthals. Yet the faces, flatter, broader, softer, hinted at traits more typical of early East Asians. It was as if two worlds had fused inside a single head. These were not primitive remnants. They were hybrids of adaptation, a bridge between lineages that had once been thought separate. Far to the west, high above the clouds of the Tibetan plateau, another clue waited: the Baixia Karst cave. There, a single jawbone, the Shahe mandible, dated to about 160000 years ago, revealed the presence of the Denisovans, living, breathing, and thriving at more than 3,000 meters above sea level. Later, genetic and environmental DNA from the site showed traces of animals they hunted: yak, rhinoceros birds, small rodents. It was proof of a people who mastered thin air, cold winds, and scarcity itself. One lived in the dense, humid lowlands of Yunnan, the other on the icy roof of the world. Yet both whisper the same story: that ancient humans were not strangers divided by geography. They met, mingled, and shared their fire, their genes, and their ingenuity. Their bones, scattered across mountains and plains, are the witnesses of a time when our species' boundaries were still being written in the dust. Close your eyes and listen. The forest comes alive. The whooping calls of gibbons echo from high in the canopy. A troop of macaques chatters somewhere in the mist. And from deeper in the trees, the low, heavy rustle of an orangutan moves slowly through the strangler figs. This is Yunnan 60,000 years ago, a world that hummed with life. In the Pleistocene, these forests stretched far beyond the borders we know today. Orangutans or pongo once roamed not only Borneo and Sumatra, but also the green valleys of southern China, from Guangxi to Yunnan. Gibbons, small and agile, filled the forests of South China with their songs. And somewhere in the shadows, the last echoes of Gigantopithecus blacki, the great gentle giant, a relative of the orangutan, standing 3 meters tall, still lingered before vanishing forever around 250,000 years ago. Into this living cathedral of trees came the Neanderthals. They were not alone on an empty continent, but among cousins, a community of minds and hands, of watchers and wanderers. The Neanderthals hunted in these forests, hearing the same echoes that fill the jungle today. Perhaps they paused by the river, watching an orangutan mother cradle her child, or looked up as gibbons swung above their voices, carrying through the fog. For a brief moment in deep time, they all shared this place, humans and great apes, bound by curiosity, by survival, by the quiet recognition of kinship. Maybe, just maybe, as a Neanderthal sat sharpening a stone beneath the dripping canopy, he looked into the trees and saw a reflection of himself staring back. When we look in the mirror, we see the face of a modern human. But hidden beneath our skin in the quiet language of our genes are echoes of ancient lives, traces of a people once thought lost forever. The Neanderthals are still with us, written into the very code that makes us who we are. Today, scientists know that every person of non-African descent carries fragments of Neanderthal DNA. But what's remarkable is this: East Asians carry a little more, up to 20% higher on average than Europeans. It suggests something extraordinary, that there wasn't just one meeting between our ancestors and theirs, but many. A pattern of crossings, separations and reunions across thousands of years. Geneticists call it the multi-contact model, the idea that Neanderthals and early humans met not once but again and again along the shifting frontiers of Ice Age Asia. And the story doesn't end there. In Southeast Asia and Melanesia, people still carry 2 to 3 distinct lineages of Denisovan DNA, the genetic signature of another branch of ancient humanity, one that also mingled with Neanderthals long before we arrived. What this means is simple, yet profound. We are not the pure descendants of a single species called Homo sapiens. We are the mosaic of many ancestors, the living legacy of unions that blurred the lines between worlds. So perhaps deep within each of us, a faint memory still lingers of forests, like Longtan of firelight, flickering on ancient faces of hands shaping stone in the rain. Maybe a small part of that Neanderthal mind still dreams quietly in our blood. 50 to 60,000 years ago, the world was breathing, shifting between cold and warmth, ice and rain. Climate wasn't a backdrop. It was the stage upon which human history unfolded. During these cycles, when the great northern glaciers receded and the monsoon rains returned, green corridors opened across Asia, linking the dry steppes of the west to the humid forests of the east. These were not barren lands, but living bridges. From Western Asia, through Central Asia, into South China, ribbons of forest and river valleys stretched like veins across the continent. Through them moved herds of deer and wild cattle. And following them, the hunters, Neanderthals, and other ancient humans who traced the pulse of life itself. Rivers became their roadways. The Yangtze, the Yellow River, the Mekong, each a path carved by water, winding through mountains and plains, leading from the heart of Asia toward the subtropical south. Along their banks, groups camped, hunted and traded. Tools changed hands. Ideas crossed borders long before nations had names. When the north froze again, the forests pulled back, but the memory of those migrations remained written in the genes of those who survived. It was a rhythm as old as fire itself. When the ice advanced, people retreated. When it melted, they followed the green. So when we imagine Neanderthals walking these corridors, they are not just travelers. They are the first bridges between worlds, moving with the seasons, carrying sparks of knowledge and kinship across continents. Those shifting rivers and forests were more than routes of survival. They were the first cultural highways of humanity, where ancient hands shared the same flame, the same stone, and perhaps the same gaze beneath the open sky. The fire burns low beneath the dripping leaves, A faint breeze stirs the rain-soaked forest of ancient Yunnan, carrying the scent of wood smoke and wet earth. A Neanderthal hunter sits quietly by the flames, sharpening a stone scraper, his heavy brow flickering in the orange light. Above him on a branch veiled in mist, an orangutan watches in silence, her infant clinging to her chest. Two beings, separated by species, yet bound by something older than words. For a long time we imagined the Neanderthal as a creature of cold caves and endless snow, the Western caveman trapped in a vanished world. But here, under the green canopy of Asia, that image dissolves. The Neanderthal was not a prisoner of climate or geography. He was a symbol of adaptability, a thinker and maker, capable of crossing mountains, mastering new landscapes, and sharing the earth with countless others. His story, their story, is not one of extinction alone. It is a story of connection, of creativity, born from struggle of minds, meeting in the wild places of an unfinished world. We the living carry their legacy not only in our DNA, but in our endless curiosity, our drive to explore, our need to understand. And so, as we uncover the scattered stones of Longtan or the bones of Xuchang, we are not just studying the past, we are remembering it. Because each discovery, each fragment of that vanished humanity is a piece of our own reflection, a reminder that the journey of humankind is not over. It continues, beneath every forest canopy, within every curious mind, and in the quiet firelight that still burns inside us all.